My wife told me her old creative partner from college resurfaced, wanting to finish their abandoned screenplay. Then I found the hotel receipts. Let me rewind. My name is David, and my wife, Clara, and I have been married for 7 years. It's a second marriage for both of us. My first marriage ended when my ex-wife, Isabel, had a brief but devastating affair with a coworker. We share a wonderful son, Jake, who's now 12. Clara was previously married to a man named Robert, a charismatic but volatile artist who cheated on her repeatedly. She has a daughter, Mia, who's 10. Our little blended family felt like a miracle, a calm, happy harbor after our respective storms. We prided ourselves on radical honesty, maybe to a fault, dissecting our past relationships and pains in detail, believing transparency was our armor. Clara's past with Robert was brutal. She discovered he was having multiple affairs, one of which resulted in a child. During that dark time, she leaned heavily on an old friend, a man named Ethan. They'd met in a film studies class in college and had been intense creative partners for years, co-writing a sprawling, ambitious screenplay. They'd even placed in a few competitions with it. But life pulled them apart. He moved to the West Coast for a job in the industry, and they lost touch. When Clara reached out to him for emotional support during her divorce from Robert, he became her confidant. He advised her on legal steps, listened to her cry, and somewhere in that shared vulnerability, they decided to revive their old screenplay project. According to Clara, their communication became flirty, but with him in Los Angeles and us in Chicago, it was a fantasy, a digital escape. She said it was during these conversations she finally accepted her marriage to Robert was dead. By the end of that year, Ethan flew to Chicago to meet her in person. Shortly after, her divorce from Robert was finalized. Ethan, she told me, even moved to the Midwest to be near her, but it fell apart. Mia, then just a toddler, struggled with the new man in her life. Clara also described Ethan as having a crushing intensity, overwhelming in real life. She asked for a break, and he, feeling rejected after uprooting his life, cut ties completely. Months later, they reconnected purely to finish the screenplay. Clara admitted to me, in one of our honest moments, that they'd slept together again during that period, a physical relapse, she called it, but it ended when she started dating me. She felt it was disrespectful to have that kind of history hanging around, so she gradually stopped responding to his emails about the project. He, frustrated, blocked her everywhere. That was that, or so I believe, for 5 years. Then, a month ago, it all came flooding back. Clara was buzzing with an energy I hadn't seen in years. Ethan had messaged her out of the blue. He'd had a severe health scare, a burst appendix that led to septic shock. Facing mortality, he'd looked at his life's work. In their years of silence, he had taken their co-written screenplay, rewritten it heavily without her input, sold it, and it had been produced as a moderately successful indie film. A sequel was in development. He told her that if anything happened to him, he wanted her to have the rights to any future projects, because she was the only other person who knew the soul of the story. It sounded noble, even touching. A man making amends from a hospital bed. Clara was radiant. She dug out old notebooks, her eyes sparkling as she explained the characters' mythologies to me, pointing out where Ethan's film had deviated from their original vision. He was now working on a novelization and wanted her to co-write it. She showed me concept art he'd sent, dark, gothic landscapes from their shared imagination. I felt a pang of something, not quite jealousy, but unease. This was a profound part of her history, a part that didn't include me, and it was being resurrected by the man she'd twice been intimate with. My stomach churned with familiar, dreaded acid. I'd been here before with Isabel. The late-night texting, the sudden passion for a forgotten project, the glowing nostalgia. I voiced my concerns gently. Clara, This is amazing for you, and I want you to have this creative outlet. But given your history with Ethan, it makes me uncomfortable." She was understanding, almost too quickly. "You're right," she said, squeezing my hand. "It's not worth the weirdness. He's probably just feeling nostalgic and guilty. I'll keep it professional and distant." She even mused that he might be using the project as a pretext to reconnect romantically. I left the conversation feeling relieved. We were on the same page. But the relief was short-lived. A cold, slick doubt began coiling in my gut. Her phone, which was usually left casually on the coffee table, now accompanied her to the bathroom. She took more work calls on the back porch, even in the chilly autumn air. The screenplay notebooks were out, but she seemed less like she was working on them, and more like they were props. 3 days after our reassuring talk, I broke my own moral code. As she showered one morning, I took her phone. The message thread with Ethan was gone, completely deleted. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the cloud messaging app she used. Nothing. Then, remembering an old password she'd once used, I accessed her email on my laptop. There it was, a separate, secret email chain. The professional, nostalgic tone of the messages she'd shown me was a grotesque mask. The real messages were a different story. They discussed her upcoming business trip to a conference in Denver, but in their private thread, they were planning something else entirely. The conference, I quickly verified online, had been canceled weeks prior. They were planning a rendezvous in a secluded mountain town an hour from Denver. They shared links to a rustic cabin rental. He sent her photos of hiking trails, saying, "The aspens are gold. It'll be perfect." She replied, "Can't wait to be off the grid with you." The dates matched her supposed Denver trip. A line he wrote froze my blood. "Remember how it was last time? 3 years of silence. And you were in my arms before your suitcase hit the floor." Some connections don't fade. They just lie in wait. It wasn't a new proposal. It was a continuation. I scrolled back, my vision blurring. The affair hadn't reignited a month ago. It had been active for at least 4 months. Her girls' weekend with her cousin in Milwaukee, she'd been with him. Her late work deadline that kept her at the office overnight, him. The pieces clicked into a horrifying mosaic of betrayal. They shared intimate photos. They spoke of me with a chilling, casual cruelty. He joked about her coming home to me, smelling of pine and poor decisions. She wrote back, "He's so oblivious. It's almost sad." The rage that rose in me was a living thing, primal and white-hot. I wanted to scream, to break everything in sight, to drive to that man's apartment and reduce it to splinters. But I thought of Jake and Mia. I thought of the shattered holidays, the tears, the confusion. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The man who'd been cheated on before, the man who'd vowed never be that victim again, stepped aside. A colder, more calculating version of me took the wheel. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I began to document everything. I took screenshots of every email, every photo, every travel booking. I noted dates, times, locations. I quietly consulted my brother, who recommended his divorce attorney. 2 days later, I sat in a sleek, quiet office, laying out my digital evidence. The attorney, a woman named Mrs. Vance with kind eyes and a razor-sharp mind, nodded. "This is exceptionally thorough. We have everything we need. Now we need to plan your exit." We decided I would confront Clara after a planned trip to the cabin. Let her commit to the act fully. It would only strengthen my position. The plan was to have her served with papers shortly after her return. But waiting was an exquisite torture. Every "I love you" from her lips felt like a wasp sting. Every time she touched me, my skin crawled. I had to pretend to smile, to be the oblivious husband they found so pathetic. I threw myself into work and Jake, counting down the days. The week of her trip arrived. She packed with a barely concealed excitement, humming as she folded sweaters. "It'll be so good to network again," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The mountains will be a nice change of pace." I kissed her goodbye at the door, my lips a stiff imitation of affection. "Have a productive trip," I said, the words ash in my mouth. The 2 days she was gone were the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I paced. I cleaned the house obsessively. I took Jake to the movies and held his hand in the dark, drawing strength from his quiet presence. Finally, the evening of her return came. I saw her car pull into the driveway through the window. I had set up a voice recorder on the bookshelf. My phone was in my pocket, Mrs. Vance's number on speed dial. She came in, face flushed from the cold, or perhaps from something else. She looked satisfied. "Honey, I'm back," she called, dropping her bag. "Welcome home," I said from the armchair, not getting up. "How was Denver?" "It was great. Really insightful panels. Exhausting, though." She walked over to kiss me. I turned my head, so her lips brushed my cheek. "Funny," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I checked. The Colorado Creative Summit was canceled over a month ago due to flooding at the venue." The color drained from her face. "What?" "No. They moved it to a virtual platform, but we had in-person meetups." "Cut the shit, Clara." I stood up, looking down at her. How was the cabin near Silverthorne? Did the aspens look as gold as in the pictures Ethan sent? Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like an animal caught in headlights. "I know everything," I continued, my voice low and steady, though my hands trembled. "The emails, the photos, Milwaukee, the late nights at work. I've read every vile, mocking word you've written to him. I've seen the pictures." "David, no, you don't understand," she stammered, tears springing to her eyes instantly. "It's not what it looks like. He's been manipulating me. He wouldn't let me go." "Did he manipulate you into planning a getaway?" I interrupted. "Did he force you to write about how sad and oblivious I am? Did he hold a gun to your head when you sent him those photos?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a particularly egregious screenshot of their chat, holding it up to her face. She crumpled, sobbing onto the couch. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. It got out of hand. He means nothing. It was the past. It pulled me back in." "The past." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "You've been actively lying to me and cheating on me for months. You looked me in the eye and lied. You planned a romantic weekend while I was home taking care of our kids. Don't blame the past. This is all you." She switched tactics, grabbing my arm. "I love you. I'll end it right now. I'll block him everywhere. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." "There is no fix for this," I said, pulling my arm away. "You broke it beyond repair. I've already filed for divorce." The words hung in the air. Her tears stopped, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "You filed? Already? While you were playing house in the mountains with your soulmate?" "Yes." The word soulmate tasted bitter. It was a term she'd used about him in one of their emails. "He's not my soulmate," she shrieked, anger now mixing with her panic. "You are. This is my home. You can't just throw me out." "It's my home," I stated flatly. "The deed is in my name. You need to pack your things and go. You can stay with your parents. Mia can stay here tonight. We'll figure out arrangements tomorrow. But you need to leave. Now." What followed was a blur of hysteria, pleading, and finally, cold resignation. She packed a suitcase, her movements sluggish with shock. I called her parents and, without going into graphic detail, told them their daughter had been unfaithful and was on her way to them. Her father's weary sigh on the phone told me he wasn't entirely surprised. When the taxi arrived, she stood in the foyer, a shattered figure. "You planned this all along," she whispered accusingly. "I adapted to reality you created," I replied, holding the door open. She left. The next few weeks were a grueling logistical and emotional marathon. Mia was confused and heartbroken. I sat with her, holding her as she cried, assuring her I would always be in her life, that none of this was her fault. Jake was angry, bitterly angry at Clara for betraying our family. Isabel, my ex-wife, unexpectedly became my rock. She took Jake for extra days, brought over meals, and listened to me vent without judgment. Our shared history, our old wounds, create a unique bridge of understanding. "Isabel," I said to her one evening over coffee, "why are you being so kind after everything?" She looked down at her cup. "Because I remember the man I broke," she said softly, "and I see him again now. No one deserves this, David, especially not you." Clara, from her parents' house, oscillated between begging for forgiveness and sending bitter, blaming texts. Ethan, the affair partner, had the audacity to send me a long, rambling message. He claimed Clara was a creative muse and that I had interrupted a love story years in the making. He wrote, "You had your time. She was always meant to finish what we started." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my lawyer. The divorce proceedings were swift, thanks to the ironclad evidence and a prenuptial agreement we'd wisely signed. The house remained mine. We established a custody schedule for Mia that involved her father, Robert, who returned briefly from an art residency in Europe. He was surprisingly decent about it all, sharing a beer with me on the porch, both of us shaking our heads at the mutual chaos Clara had wrought in our lives. A strange new normal began to emerge. Isabel and I started spending more time together, not as ex-spouses bound by a child, but as two people who had seen each other at their worst and were now navigating a fragile, unexpected middle ground. One evening, after putting Jake to bed at my place, we talked on the sofa. Us talking like this, it feels different, I ventured. "I know," she said. "I've done a lot of work on myself, David. Therapy, a lot of reflection on what I did to you. I've never forgiven myself." "I forgave you a long time ago," I said, and realized it was true. The old betrayal had lost its sting, replaced by the fresher, more visceral pain from Clara. But in this shared space of aftermath, something was quietly healing. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. Clara moved into a small apartment. From mutual acquaintances, I heard she tried to reconnect with Ethan, but it fizzled spectacularly. Apparently, the fantasy couldn't survive the harsh light of reality and mutual recrimination. The indie film franchise based on her screenplay was quietly shelved. One Saturday, almost a year after the cabin confrontation, I was at the park with Jake and Mia. Isabel was there too, laughing as she pushed me on a swing. The sun was warm. The sounds of kids playing filled the air. Jake looked at me, then at Isabel, and smiled a small, knowing smile. Later, as we packed up the picnic, Isabel's hand brushed mine. I didn't pull away. I laced my fingers through hers. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but it was a decision, a step toward a future that wasn't about forgetting the past, but about building something new from its lessons. "We should take the kids to the zoo next weekend," I said. She squeezed my hand. "I like that." The ghost of Clara's betrayal, the echo of Ethan's mocking words, they were still there, faint scars on the landscape of my life, but they no longer defined its borders. The story that began with a screenplay and a lie was ending not with dramatic plot twist, but with the quiet, deliberate turning of a page. The next chapter, for the first time in a long time, felt like my own to write.